In the glass and steel kingdom of Voss Innovations, Elena Voss ruled with an authority that was nothing short of breathtaking. At 35, she was the very definition of lethal elegance. Her long auburn waves cascaded around high, sharp cheekbones, framing a face dominated by emerald eyes that could either freeze a boardroom into submission or ignite a spark of inspiration. Her body was a testament to discipline, sculpted by years of dedication. A narrow waist, hips that swayed with an unconscious command beneath her perfectly tailored power suits. She was the image of success, the woman who had it all. But beneath that armor of success, the real Elena was stretched to her breaking point. A constant war was being waged inside her. Migraines felt like claws digging into her temples, a relentless, throbbing pain. Her shoulders were locked in a state of permanent tension, as if bracing for an impact that never came. And when night fell, her mind refused to rest. It would race, replaying meetings, dissecting strategies, and anticipating the challenges of the next day, turning sleep into a distant, forgotten luxury. She was a queen trapped in her own castle, isolated by the very success she had built. Then, Alex Rivera walked into her life. At 28, he was a stark contrast to the sterile perfection of her world. He was tall, with broad shoulders that filled a doorway. His dark hair was perpetually tousled, as if he'd just run his hands through it in a moment of deep thought or frustration. His eyes held the dangerous, captivating blue of a summer storm just before it breaks. He didn't stride through the office with arrogance. He moved with a quiet, grounded confidence that drew people in. When he spoke, his voice was a low, warm timbre that made you lean closer, eager to catch every word. And his ideas, they were sharp, incisive, cutting through the usual boardroom jargon and getting straight to the heart of the matter. He was a force of nature in a world of spreadsheets and projections. Their first real collision, the moment the tectonic plates of their worlds truly shifted, happened during a grueling late-night sprint for a major product launch. The office was a ghost town, everyone else having long since surrendered to exhaustion. But Elena remained, a solitary figure in her vast corner office, the city lights glittering like a cold, distant galaxy 20 floors below. She sat at her desk, massaging her own neck in futile, frustrating circles, trying to ease a knot that felt as hard as a rock. The pressure was immense, the deadline unforgiving, and she was running on fumes. Suddenly, the door to her office opened without a knock. It was an intrusion she would normally never tolerate. Alex stepped inside, a silhouette against the hallway light, holding 2 steamy mugs. His presence filled the room. "You're still here," he stated, his voice calm and even. It wasn't a question, but an observation. Elena didn't look up from her screen, her fingers still working at the tense muscle in her neck. "So are you," she shot back, her tone clipped and dismissive. She didn't have time for this, for him. He walked over to her desk and set a mug of black coffee beside her keyboard, the rich aroma cutting through the stale office air. Then, he moved behind her chair, his movements deliberate and sure. He didn't ask for permission again. He simply said, "May I?" His voice was low, almost a whisper, but it carried a weight that made her pause. She stiffened in her chair, a flicker of alarm running through her. "What are you?" she began, ready to shut him down, to reassert her authority. But before she could finish, his hands settled on her shoulders. They were warm, sure, and incredibly strong. There was no hesitation, no tentative exploration. It was the touch of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. The first press of his thumbs into her trapezius muscles made her gasp. A sharp intake of breath that was part pain, part surprise. He didn't stop. He began to work the knots with slow, deliberate circles, the pressure deep enough to hurt in a way that was almost beautiful. It was a focused, intelligent touch, targeting the very source of her chronic pain. She felt the exact moment a particularly stubborn knot finally surrendered, melting under his touch like wax beneath a gentle flame. A soft sound escaped her lips, a breathy, involuntary, "Jesus." "Breathe," he murmured, his voice a soothing balm against her frayed nerves. He worked in complete silence for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 10 minutes. His palms slid down the sides of her neck, easing the tension there. His fingers threaded into her hair, gently cradling her skull and tilting her head forward. Worked in complete silence for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 10 minutes. His palms slid down the sides of her neck, easing the tension there. His fingers threaded into her hair, gently cradling her skull and tilting her head forward, releasing a pressure she hadn't even realized she was holding. Then his hands returned to her back, kneading the rigid muscles along her spine with an expert's care. Each movement was precise, undoing years of accumulated stress, one knot at a time. By the time he finished, she was boneless in her chair. Her head had fallen forward, her lips were slightly parted, and her mind, for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, was quiet. The relentless race of thoughts had ceased. There was only the lingering warmth of his touch and a profound sense of release. When he finally stepped away, she felt his absence like a physical ache, a sudden coldness where his warmth had been. The silence in the room was different now. It wasn't empty. Tea was filled with a new, unspoken awareness. That was the beginning. That was the moment everything changed. That one act of unexpected kindness, of human connection, cracked the armor Elena had so carefully constructed. It became their secret ritual. Late nights at the office were no longer just about work. They were punctuated by these stolen moments, a quiet cup of coffee, a brief, knowing look across a crowded conference room, and sometimes, when the stress became too much, the healing pressure of Alex's hands on her shoulders. He never asked for anything in return. He simply saw her, the real her, struggling beneath the weight of her empire, and offered a moment of peace. Their connection deepened, moving beyond the physical release of a massage into something more profound. They really talked. He stayed late, not just to work, but to listen as she vented her frustrations, shared her fears about the launch, and even confessed her loneliness at the top. He wasn't intimidated by her power. He was intrigued by the mind behind it. And she, in turn, found herself captivated by his passion, his quiet strength, and the way he saw the world. He didn't want anything from her, and in her world, that was the rarest commodity of all. Weeks later, the product launch was a resounding success. They celebrated with the team, champagne flowing, but the loudest applause felt hollow to Elena. The only thing that felt real was the look Alex gave her from across the room, a look of shared victory, of pride, of something deeper. The next day, he found her in her office. "Get away with me," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Just for a weekend. A cabin in the Catskills. She was a CEO, she couldn't just disappear." But looking into his stormy blue eyes, she knew she couldn't refuse. For the first time, she chose herself over her company. The drive up was filled with an easy conversation and a simmering anticipation. The Catskills cabin was a haven, a rustic dream of wood and stone nestled in a forest blanketed by snow. Snow fell in heavy silent curtains outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, turning the world into a soft white blur. Inside, a fire roared in the stone hearth, casting a warm, dancing glow across the room. They had barely made it through the door, their bags dropping to the floor with a soft thud before the tension that had been building for weeks finally snapped. Alex had her pressed against the rough timber wall, his mouth crashing down on hers. It wasn't gentle or tentative. It was a storm of pent-up need, a desperate, hungry kiss that stole her breath. He tasted of whiskey from the flask he sipped on the drive and the clean, crisp scent of winter air. She wrapped her arms around his neck, kissing him back with a ferocity that surprised them both, her fingers tangling in his tousled hair. All the control, all the discipline she had honed over the years simply dissolved in the heat of his touch. He lifted her effortlessly, her legs wrapping around his waist as he carried her to the bedroom. Clothes were torn away with an urgency that bordered on frantic. In the firelit room, there were no power dynamics, no CEO and employee. There was only a man and a woman stripped bare of everything but their raw, desperate need for each other. He laid her on the bed, and his hands and mouth began a slow, deliberate exploration of her body, discovering and worshipping every curve, every sensitive spot. He was as patient and focused in his love-making as he was with her tense shoulders, bringing her to a shattering peak that left her gasping his name into the quiet of the room. She came again later, a quiet, shuddering release this time, her face pressed into the pillow, sullen tears of overwhelming pleasure and emotional release slipping down her cheeks. He held her afterward, his body a warm, solid presence against hers, his hands stroking her hair as her breathing slowly returned to normal. They didn't speak. There was no need for words. In the silence, she felt a profound sense of peace, a feeling of being completely and utterly seen, accepted, and cherished. When morning light finally crept through the snow-dusted windows, Elena Voss, the untouchable, unbreakable CEO, lay curled against Alex's chest. Her body was marked by his mouth, his hands, his love. For the first time in years, the tension in her body was gone, replaced by the sweet, lingering ache of being thoroughly, gloriously claimed. She felt his steady heartbeat against her ear, his arm holding her securely against him. The world outside, with its demands and deadlines, seemed a million miles away. Here, in this cabin wrapped in his arms, she was just Elena. And as she lay there, listening to the crackle of the dying fire and the soft sound of his breathing, she knew with absolute certainty that she never wanted this feeling to end. This was her real kingdom, and he was its king.